Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I'm Ross Lipman. I am a co-curator of this series along with Paul Malcolm, and we're very glad to have you. A few housekeeping things. If you could silence your cell phones and turn off any light-emitting devices. And also settle in. We have a long program tonight. We have a lot of exciting things that are part of it, including I'm going to be beginning with a longer presentation than we normally do, about a little over 10 minutes, but it's a lot of interesting material to present on Barbara Loden. And then following the screening of Wanda, we're going to have Marco Joachim, her son, in person to discuss growing up with her and with Elia Kazan. I do also want to mention, and then we'll of course conclude with the visitors. Tomorrow, we also just learned today, we're going to have a special guest, Robert Young, at age 95, the cinematographer and co-writer and producer of Nothing But a Man, will be joining us tomorrow for that screening after Shirley Clark's The Cool World. And, of course, The Cool World, I think most of you will know, is an extraordinary film, but some of you might not know Nothing But a Man. This is a truly extraordinary work, and if you are unfamiliar with who Robert Young is, he also is the director of Alambrista and the Ballad of Gregorio Cortez. So this is a really exciting chance to see him at age 95. So I really would encourage you to come out for that screening. About Wanda, I should mention that I was very fortunate back when I was working as a restorationist at UCLA. I was fortunate to personally find, and I guess in a sense save, the original camera rolls of Wanda one day before they were earmarked from destruction in a lab closure. So they weren't even marked with her name. It was just Harry Schuster, but I just saw the title Wanda. I thought, who's Harry Schuster? Well, you'll learn in my talk in a minute. But I thought, maybe this is Wanda? Let's hope. And it turned out. So without that little bit of good luck, we might not even be here today. I'd like to thank Paul and UCLA for just helping put this whole series together, the Film Foundation and Gucci for their funding of not just the restoration of Wanda, but so many excellent films over the years. Marco Joachim, Marco, would you raise your hand, please? Who will be joining us in conversation after the screening. And then I'd like to thank Cinetech, NT Picture and Sound, and Audio Mechanics for the wonderful restoration work, and the Academy for the loaning of the print of the visitors. So I'm now going to give a little bit of a talk. Jim, if you could open the curtains, please. This is a short excerpt of a much longer talk that I used to give on Wanda back when we did the restoration a number of years ago. Barbara Loden, at surface glance, might be the least... Do we have the podium light on me? Yes, we do. Sorry. Barbara Loden, at surface glance, might be the least likely candidate to have produced one of the masterpieces of American cinema. According to legend, she was conceived in a field of daisies. Born in Marion, Ohio in 1932, she had to face not only class, but also gender discrimination throughout her life. Today, it's even harder to appreciate the struggles she had to confront, not just in her professional encounters, but within herself. For by her own admission, she had grown up in an environment wherein a woman's only chances of self-improvement were through attachment to a man. It's precisely from these struggles that Wanda grew. She began her career as a dancer at the Copacabana, and with the help of her first husband, Larry Joachim, began appearing on the Ernie Kovacs show. She soon thereafter met noted director Elia Kazan, whom she was later to marry. Kazan cast her in a small role in his excellent Wild River in 1960, and more famously, Splendor in the Grass, seen here with a young Warren Beatty. However, it wasn't until she appeared in Kazan's stage production of Arthur Miller's After the Fall that she came to true public attention for her spectacular portrayal of the character modeled after Marilyn Monroe. Her celebrity was short-lived, however, for it was soon after this that Kazan and her withdrew into a life of relative seclusion. Partially at Kazan's urging, she turned down the role of Bonnie in Bonnie and Clyde, and her understudy in After the Fall Faye Dunaway, took the role opposite Beatty. Of such details, history is made. We can be grateful in one respect. If her acting career had taken off, who knows whether we'd ever have seen Wanda. Loden was furious when Kazan later cast Dunaway in a role largely based on her in his film The Arrangement. And she revealed that her own misgivings about Bonnie and Clyde lay elsewhere. She stated that the movie was unrealistic and glamorized the characters. People like that would never get into situations or lead that kind of life. They were too beautiful. Wanda is the anti-Bonnie and Clyde. I was later to learn from documentarian D.A. Pennebaker that the film had been funded by friend Harry Schuster as a tax write-off and intended to lose money. However, while it was indeed a huge financial flop, its critical success, particularly in Europe, led to just enough income that it even failed as a write-off. It had in effect failed at losing. The connection to Pennebaker is no accident. Loden needed a creative partner in the project and ultimately chose Nick Preferis, who was to both shoot and edit the film. Preferis had begun his career as an editor for Pennebaker and, crucially, emerged from the documentary tradition of cinema verite. By both intent and default, Wanda is one of the most authentic depictions of small-town America committed to screen. With its location shooting, existing light cinematography, long takes, and extensive use of non-actors, it functions at one level as pure documentary. Yet with the exquisitely honed performances of the two professional leads, Loden and Michael Higgins, and perhaps a trace of its Kazanian pedigree, it also functions as a high-level, if intentionally laconic, drama. In hindsight, it serves as a key work of a largely unnoticed wellspring of American neorealism, which we're delighted to be exploring in the current series. As the focus is neorealism, I don't want to say too much about the restoration, but that said, many of the films that we're showing are carefully restored prints by UCLA or sister organizations, and some of the workflow is of relevance, so I'll just now give a very brief excerpt of the longer lecture that I used to present on Wanda's restoration, and for those of you interested in more detail, I recommend going to the Criterion website where I have an essay on it. A crucial component of Wanda was its being shot on 16mm Ektachrome EFB stock, which has a unique color palette, completely unlike Eastman Color Negative, Eastman Commercial Film, or Kodachrome. And in a stroke of luck, 98% of Wanda was unfaded. A key part of our work would be restoring the unique colors of the original. Or would it? To quote an early review by Gordon Gow from the time of its initial release, "For the first couple of minutes, I thought it was all a ghastly mistake, this terrible muzz color. But it soon became obvious that Barbara Loden meant it to look messy, as if real life had been recorded perchance by an amateur photographer with cheap film and poor laboratory facilities." Gow's is a nice interpretation. In fact, it's common in restoring independent films to encounter a movie whose primary characteristics were deeply rooted in low production values, which actually need to be retained in the restoration. And if you look at the top right and then the bottom, you'll see two images of what the film used to look like. Those are from the movie. This is from a press package and show what he was referring to. However, in an interview in the Film Journal of summer 1971, Barbara Loden was asked the following question. "The color in the film often has a washed out effect and the lighting is sometimes very dim. Were these effects intentional?" Loden: "Unless you have your own laboratory, it's difficult to control the quality of the color. In our original print, the color looked extremely good, but later prints made by different labs were not such good quality." Gow thought the poor quality of the original prints was intentional. Loden's comments belie this. Now, with access to the film's original camera rolls, we have a better sense of how it appeared in actuality. The film was not only not ugly, it was in fact quite beautiful. If anything, the amateur 16mm Ektachrome's palette capturing the decidedly unglamorous lives of its characters in rich detail. Extensive color experimentation was conducted at Cinetech laboratories to find the best way to render this unique reversal color palette, which could not be accurately conveyed with standard printing methodologies either then or now. Another word on the print tonight, you will see some dirt on the screen, some traces to the original elements, and some of it just due to simple wear and tear from the print's successful touring over the years. But we test screened a roll earlier, and the color is really just stunning, so you'll see what we're talking about. Also, one last technical note, there's some historical ambiguity as to Wanda's correct aspect ratio, as is discussed on my essay on the Criterion website, and tonight we'll be presenting it in 1:6:6 for you technical people out there. Wanda was initially based on a newspaper clipping Barbara Loden had seen about a working-class Polish woman involved in a failed bank robbery who, upon hearing of her sentence to 20 years in prison, thanked the judge. The desperation of that story resonated with Loden, and it eventually grew into a screenplay called The Gray World before Loden settled on its final name. It took 6 years to raise the money needed to complete the film. According to Loden, Kazan was supportive, and without him, she may never have made it. But the vision was clearly hers. Scholar Berenice Reynaud correctly notes a patronizing tone in Kazan's comment that, "I didn't really believe she had the equipment to be an independent filmmaker, but she and Nick were a good combination." And they were. Throughout Kazan's autobiography, one finds him commenting on Loden's limitations while simultaneously marveling at her results and the depth in her work as both an actress and director. Some even speculate a jealousy at the acclaim Wanda was to receive, and it clearly helped as a model and inspiration for his own low-budget film, The Visitors, made after Wanda, which will screen later tonight. It's important to note the trajectory of Kazan's career at that point. The arrangement, previously mentioned, was based on Kazan's best-selling novel, which was itself based on Loden. Unlike the book, the film with Faye Dunaway was a flop, and Kazan couldn't get funding after that and was kind of on the outskirts of the industry. Seeing Loden's success with Wanda helped Kazan realize the great possibility of low-budget cinema, and he went ahead and shot The Visitors in 16mm in their own home, with his son Chris writing the script, and Preferis, again, as the cinematographer. While the film is ostensibly less neorealist, it's a startling counterpoint to Wanda and definitely bears relevance on the conversation, and there's some important things to know about it. It's in its unique way completely devastating and if perhaps flawed in some ways, but we'll talk about that with Marco in conversation after Wanda. Wanda premiered at the Venice Film Festival in 1970, where it won a Fipresci Prize. Although Loden was to subsequently produce 2 short films and starred in the first New York production of Come Back to the Five and Dime Jimmy Dean, she never again worked on a scale as large as Wanda. Today, it's considered a classic, listed as one of the 100 greatest American films of all time by noted critic Jonathan Rosenbaum and many others. Loden was to die tragically of cancer at the tender age of 48 in 1980. Wanda remains her lasting legacy. Thank you. Please give a warm welcome to Marco Joachim.
How you doing?
So, Marco, this film is always so devastating to watch. But I guess I'd just like to begin by asking you to tell us your memories of the film's production.
Yeah, so I was a kid during the can you hear me now? I was a kid when they were making it, but I remember being on set, being with them on set at the time, and it was very exciting. It was a very exciting thing to be around. I remember Michael Higgins putting makeup, putting a scar on his head, making a scar every morning. I remember a lot of stuff about the picture. The dynamite. I remember them, the props, making the props. That's about. And I remember the editing. I remember because that was done in the basement where I grew up. So we had they got some stuff and they were editing down there a lot. Actually, the next picture too was edited there too in the basement of our house. So
you said you were actually practicing with.
With some of the leftovers, yeah, because the leftover stuff I learned to edit on film with that, yeah. So that was cool. But
Now we know what happened to the outtakes of Wanda.
no, that's, well, they said they weren't using it, so that's the stuff they threw away.
Yeah, can you tell us about? Well, actually, here's a question for you. I've always wanted to know this. To your recollection, did your mother change in any way through the process of working on Wanda or through the exhibition, or was she always the same to you, in your opinion?
The same, the same. Yeah.
Just so success or the critical success had no effect one way or the other, or the process of making it.
She enjoyed a period of it being very happy about everything, but she was staying busy. She just started to work on plays and started to direct. She was always working on projects, so it was just another. It was a thing, and it had a good impact at the time, and she was very proud about it. And then she was working on several of the other scripts with Nick Preferis actually too, and it was similar kind of stuff, real life kind of things, and I have those scripts, so it was interesting.
Oh.
But
And tell us how the production came about. You were telling us over dinner the story of with Harry Schuster.
because my mother had met Harry Schuster at a party, and
Who was he again? Now, for the folks here?
he used to have a thing called Lion Country Safari, which is, I don't know if anybody remembers that was in out here, and you could go on a safari and see all these animals and things. And they were at a party, and Kazan, my stepfather, was friends with him, and he said, "Are you in any movies? What are you doing, Barbara?" And she said, "I'm not. I have a script and I have a thing, and I'm trying to get this movie made." He says, I think I can get the money for you." And she's really, and I said, "Fine." And then once that happened, then it took on a life, because then my stepfather was like, "Wow, that's amazing. Now we can make this movie," and the whole thing took, and then they had a film foundation. They made a foundation to make movies that they wanted to kind of make, and that was the first movie was from the film found. I mean, what did I say? Foundation Film.
Foundation
I was
Filmmakers,
confused.
yeah.
That there's another place called right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was how that started, and the idea was they were going to make type of films they wanted to make with this foundation, but Wanda was kind of like, I think, the only one that got made with the foundation.
So, did she ever speak of Wanda in retrospect, or her experiences working on
She
it?
does. There's a documentary which
Yeah.
they made. It's on the Criterion.
Ich bin Wanda. Yeah.
Was that?
I am Wanda. Yeah.
I am Wanda, yeah.
Yeah.
And in that, she does talk a lot about Wanda and how she made it and stuff. And there's, there were a lot of articles at the time where she talked extensively about it, when it came out.
I know you were quite young, but do you remember meeting any of the characters, like the local characters? Because you have actors like Michael Higgins and your mother, but then you've also got the non-actors. Do you have any?
I guess we were at that lake where the president of the bank was, where they go to his house. He had some kids and stuff, and we were playing in the lake with the kids. I mean, it's that kind of thing. What am I gonna do? I was like 7 or 8 years old. But the point is, that's outside of, like, I was very interested in films and stuff though as a kid. That was around, and so I was like, well, you're gonna have a bank. Are you gonna have like a car chase in the movie? And oh well, no, we don't think it's. And I said, that was a kind. You know what I mean? I was like, we're gonna have some action here, But that was about my extent of like trying. The only thing is the editing. I was around for a lot of the editing, and because I come home from school and see what they were doing, and it took a long time, the editing. I think the first cut was pretty long. Like, do you know about? I think
No,
2.5 hours or something, and
Right, wow.
and they sat and they're like, oh my god, and then it got cut down a little bit. It got much better.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess you were too young to remember any of the shooting of. You would have been very young for the shooting of Kazan's last film, The Arrangement. So this would be the first that you remember, I would imagine.
No, well, I remember that, but it was almost good. But I know I was on the set of that, and for a little bit.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Visitors and how it might have followed from Wanda.
Okay, well, The Visitors was Chris Kazan, my stepfather's son, and he wrote it. and it was filmed in this Connecticut house that they had. So that was, and it was influenced by Wanda in that, as you were saying in your presentation, that my stepfather said, "Wow, she did so great with this film. I'd like to go back and make a low budget picture too," you know, and that's how The Visitors came about. Um, so. And what else? Chris was a very smart. The guy who wrote it, he was a very nice guy. My stepbrother, and he passed away young. But they filmed it mostly there in Connecticut, I believe, in the Newtown. Yeah.
And although it's not really neorealist, I always think these films bear some importance to the lives of the makers. And I was wondering, would there have been any discussion how The Visitors in some ways resonates with Kazan's troubles with HUAC in the way that On the Waterfront
Oh,
did?
that's a big question. Perhaps I think there's always a bit of that in the later Kazan, works because trying to work through things, and there's definitely you could. That's a very good point that it's the Vietnam thing and everything is similar to, you know, that someone was an outcast, that they were a hero in the Vietnam, they come back, nobody wants them, that kind of thing. So it's a very interesting comparison. That's a good one.
I'm only going to ask one more question before I throw it up to the audience, but I did want you to talk about a little bit about one interesting thing about The Visitors, which is coming up, is that this is really the first film roles for James Woods and Steve Railsback,
Right.
who went on to very notable careers. And it follows in that long Kazan tradition, which we were discussing at dinner about kind of helping discover certain people. Can you talk about your memories of them?
Well, Steve Railsback was a really nice guy. He was a lot of fun, and I don't.
Which you would not know from watching this
Right,
movie, or his role as
and
Charles Manson in Helter Skelter.
That's right. He
or,
played the Charles Manson role in this Helter Skelter in the movie, and he was scary. But he also was in The Stunt Man with Peter O'Toole, and it was starting to become very big at some point. But he was a very nice guy, very intense actor and stuff. And he was also in some. He was good friends with us. He was one of those guys came around the house a lot, and you know, talked about art and movies and stuff. And my mother liked him. My mother got along well with him. Uh, so, but I don't remember. I don't really remember the James Woods that much at the time. I don't remember.
right. Oh, and you were also just speaking of how your home was this center for creativity. Even at the time when their careers on the surface are not as big. Of course, why don't you talk a little bit about your mother's theatrical and teaching career? Because you were telling us an interesting story about Christopher Reeves. Over
Oh
time.
yes, well that was a good one. Well, my mother, after Wanda and everything, she started doing off Broadway shows, directing, and she did acting classes. And one of the people was Chris Reeves. He was in a play she had about Ava Braun, and
And he was quite young then.
very young, his first role or something. And at some point, he was coached. I think it's in his book, but about my mother was coaching him for Superman, and I remember him, coming by, and she had some very interesting things to say about helping him playing more sensitive part and not doing the typical thing in the first Superman movie. And he was coming over, and she was coaching him for the whole thing. And then he said, "I got the part." And he came over. I was like, "Oh my God!" And that was a big deal. He was around a lot. He was a very nice.
What
guy.
was that advice that you said that she?
Oh, that she said you're gonna. This is I remember this. She said, when you put on the outfit, they're gonna accept you as Superman. This is gonna be a big picture. You're gonna. So, but what can you bring to it as an actor? And bring in your own thing. How would we know he's going to play? You're going to play Clark Kent. That's a sort of. How can you bring something new to the part, and from your own self? And that's and and I think if you watch the first Superman movie with Chris Reeves, he's very sensitive in it, which is new. Superman wasn't sensitive necessarily. I mean, but going way back in the movies and things they made, he was the first sort of sensitive Superman, and I think that comes from that coaching. So that was interesting.
let's throw it up to the audience here if we have any questions for Marco. Anywhere.
What are the other scripts about, and is there any interest in publishing them?
Yes, in fact, I'm supposed to try to get published the Wanda script at some point because I've gotten all of them together. There's a lot of different versions of it and stuff, and but in terms of the other stuff, um, maybe I could. I haven't had it's just there's so many things going on with the distribution in the first place of the movie again, but that's something that I should be looking into.
What are they
Right.
about? Can you just give us a short little précis of what they're about?
One was called Movie Star, and it was about another character that my mother would play, and her rise to the top, and it was something like that. But it was very harrowing and stuff too. It was not pretty. Uh, uh, I think that was sort of like it was like an alcoholic actress who like so rises to the top or something like that. That was interesting. What was the other one? Well, I have them all at my house. I can't remember right now the other one. Till There Was You. There's something called Till There Was You. There was an adaptation of The Awakening, which is Kate Chopin, if anybody knows. And there's like a whole script of that. There's a bunch of things. She was always working, and up till like I said, up till she was before she died, she was in a play. Was a Five and Dime Jimmy Dean, and that was very hard for her to get through.
Directing it and then also filling in for the lead role.
Sandy Dennis,
for
yeah.
filling in for
She
for
wasn't
Sandy-
supposed to be in it, and the last minute, Sandy Dennis couldn't do it after doing the rehearsals. So my mother had to learn the lines really quickly when she was like sick, with cancer and things. But she was always working, always directing. Had acting classes that she taught, So
Some other questions from the audience over there?
This is just kind of a simple question, but your mother inhabits that role so totally. I mean, it's like one of the great roles of cinema. But she's also acting, she's a person, and you might just have some insight, especially since you were on the set, of just, we see Wanda the character, just a fantastic character. But just very simply, like, how is your mother different as a person from this character that we know her by?
oh, well, she was very funny actually. Had a very good sense of humor. She was fun. She was kind of depressed too. I would say she was had some was had some just wasn't that happy about certain things in life, but she was very happy in other ways and encouraged about other things. She was, how can I say, it's what she portrayed is a part of her, you know, but she also was a lot of fun, like a lot of fun. Really, she was very intellectual. Actually, very smart. But I mean, self-taught in that way. Um, so she was like it would say she wasn't like that. If you met her, she wouldn't be like that. But she did come from a rough background in terms of her upbringing. She came from a rough background, and you know, very low income kind of family and stuff, and had it rough. I mean, I think she I think I don't know, ran away, but she ended up in New York at 17 or something on her own, from North Carolina. So there was nothing to do in North Carolina. So she's that whole world that's in the picture. She knows what that's like, and where in those days that was kind of, you could be a waitress in town or whatever you're gonna do, but that was about all you could do. You know what I mean, in those days, and so there weren't that many opportunities. So she came to New York to become something, and then she did. That's
One thing I'll just add to that too is, I mean, obviously her performance is extraordinary, and people rightly associate her with the role. But I also don't know if it quite does enough justice to say that it is her because if you look at the other film roles that she has, the roles are quite small, but she really captures the screen from some very notable cast members. She commands every scene that she's in, no matter how small her role is. If you watch the other films that she's in, your eyes can't go off her. And the only thing that we really, since I guess there's the early Erna Kovacs things, which I think are quite good, although I haven't seen them in years. But the major role that she really had was After the Fall, which it's hard to describe how successful that was. She took over Broadway with that. I mean, it was huge. It was like you saw it on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post in the slideshow. And this was getting major write-ups, but then she just never had the opportunities after that. So I think she really was this major actress that just, again, didn't have the chances to... Yeah,
that I mean, you're right, because when you look at Splendor in the Grass, I mean, she's like a completely different character in that.
yeah, they're small roles, but she really just takes over. It's kind of uncanny. So, some other questions?
That's about it.
Nothing? Oh, okay, one more? Should we do one more and then we'll go to the break? Okay.
Do you know much about the locations? Like in town, was that an actual bank that they just shut down for filming?
The bank scene was a complicated scene, apparently, and yeah, they had to. Well, that's why there was a bit of a budget for the picture. I want to say it was $100,000 budget.
I think
A little more than that.
I have it in my notes. I don't recall.
Yeah. That's why
There's a little more than that,
A little more than
but
that.
not much.
Yeah. Everything. Oh, we were gonna say is most of the there's only my mother, Michael Higgins, and another maybe the husband of my mother in the movie were the actors. Everybody else is real people, and like the bank tellers, the guy who works at the factory. These are all. Everybody was real. They used. They say, you want to be in a movie, and we got to film. Okay, and so nobody else was a real actor except for my mother and Michael Higgins and one other person.
Oh, and
That's one of the charms of the film, I think.
speaking of this does follow up on our series, though. Am I right in, from what I've read, your mother was really pretty well versed in, and she would be going to international art films, and she would have been familiar with Italian neorealists and.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
She loved Luis Buñuel and Luis C. Fellini and all these kind of things, and she was very into foreign films and.
So on the one hand, you had the practical necessity of not having a budget that led her to this aesthetic, but she was also primed to know how to, to not be stuck in a Hollywood model.
She always wanted to do these, she was very, knew what she wanted. That's the thing. So one thing I think that's why Wanda succeeds, because she really made her picture. She could have done it many different ways.
Right.
And it could have been done many different ways, but she really had a vision that came through with that, and I think Nick Preferis worked great with her as a cameraman. Some of the camera work is great in that picture, I think, and how sort of co-helped the whole thing. So, and Kazan helped during the bank scene. He was at the bank scene because it was rather complicated because there were so many things going on. He acted as second director to my mother in that scene, not the first director, but a second, just to help because the bank scene was rather complicated, as I remember they said.
Yeah, it looks like
Too big. Everything else was smaller, but that was complicated. So, I think it was in Carbondale, I want to say, is the name of the town, I think. Scranton. But there was another, we were looking at, we were near there, right? But I think... all the locations were there. There's, it's all just, that's all it was. It was just right on. There was no sets. They just filmed in the houses and filmed everywhere. You can see that. That's all they did.
Great. Well, Marco, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Okay.
And
Thank you. Thank you, Ross, for everything you've done. And Ross did a terrific job on the restoration and everything, and his presentation. I got to give him that. That's fantastic.
And thanks. And we're going to have a short break, and then I hope you'll join us to see what Kazan followed up Wanda's with.